With a magic number of 1, the New York Mets have 2 chances to clinch a playoff berth today. Will they get the job done? We'll talk about it on today's show.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I work as the managing editor. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, it all comes down to this, a doubleheader for your lives to make the playoffs. You just got to win one. This is going to be a day as a Mets fan that we will never forget. Whatever happens, all the different outcomes that are at stake here, the Mets just clinching, cool. The Mets could sweep this doubleheader, make the playoffs, and eliminate the Braves in the process, or what none of us want to think about, the season ending today. Everything is up for grabs, and it's a lot of fun. As much as we all hated how it has come to this when Major League Baseball dealt with all the weather this week and tried to decide what to do, and they basically just said, all right, we'll play a doubleheader if we have to. Well, guess what? They have to. And so it's going to be a lot of fun today as the entire baseball world is watching this doubleheader. Tomorrow, if the Mets are in, the ramifications are going to be a little bit unfortunate, but I still think this is a really exciting day where I hope people called out for work and they're getting to watch Mets baseball because it's going to be memorable, to say the least. I also want to let you all know, if you're looking for my recap of Mets Brewers, that big win the Mets had on Sunday, I did a full live stream on this after the game. So if you go to Locked On Mets YouTube channel, you can still find the replay of that. And if you're looking on your podcast feed and you just clicked the most recent episode to listen to this morning and you're looking for all the excitement talking about that game, just scroll a couple episodes back there. You will find my post-game reaction. You'll also find the postcast, which is on the Locked On New York Sports YouTube channel, to give you another little bit of post-game coverage. But again, if you are looking for that, you can find it wherever you get your podcast. But let's talk about the stage for today and the fact that Tylor Megill has been put out into the forefront to be the starting pitcher for the New York Mets with a chance to clinch in Game 1 against Spencer Schwellenbach. I mentioned this on that live stream. I talked through the options, and I said on that show this made total sense. The Mets should go with Tylor Megill. At the time, it wasn't announced. Now it has been. The reason why you're pitching Megill Game 1 instead of Luis Severino, and the reason why the Braves are holding Chris Sale for a Game 2, essentially these teams have the benefit of holding out their ace for the Braves for sure, from the Mets, Luis Severino, a co-ace, I guess. You're holding them out because if you win Game 1, you can save them, pitch them Game 1 of the wild card route. If you have to exhaust all of your starters in this doubleheader, you do it to get in. But for both of these teams, it puts them behind the 8 ball trying to win a wild card round. Where for the Mets, you're looking at maybe Sean Manaea on short rest Game 1. And then you might have to go to Jose Quintana's short rest Game 2. And then wait, if there's a Game 3, you might have to go to David Peterson short rest. I mean, there's just no good options. Or there's a bullpen game at some point in that series. So there is a lot of pressure to win Game 1. But from a Mets perspective, while starting Luis Severino against Spencer Schwellenbach gives you a better chance to win that first game, then all of a sudden, if you lose it, it really is Tylor Megill for your life with no fallback plan. If Megill gets knocked around, you're out. This way, if Megill gets knocked around, you still have Severino pitching a Game 2, and Chris Sale won't start that game. It'll be some form of a bullpen game for the Braves as they try to save up their pitching for a wild card round they would have clinched after Game 1. So this was the only decision for the New York Mets. I'm glad they went this way. And it gives Tylor Megill a very interesting opportunity. And to me, if it is Megill that gets the job done, it will be a really remarkable story for this franchise because David Peterson is the one that got you that victory on Sunday with a spectacular performance, 7 shutout innings. David Peterson this season has established himself as not just a big league starter, but a really good one. 21 starts, 2.90 ERA, career high 121 innings pitched, and again, backs against the wall, goes 7 shutout innings, delivers a huge performance to put a stamp at the end of his season. Megill's got a chance to do the same, and if you really think about this franchise over the past decade, these are the 2 starting pitchers the Mets have developed. That's it. You go back to the last Mets team that had a deep playoff run, 2015. That was a team that was built on young starting pitching that the Mets stockpiled for a long time under Sandy Alderson when they went through that rebuild. You got Harvey, then Wheeler came up, then it was DeGrom, Matt, Syndergaard. And outside of Wheeler, all those guys were part of that rotation in the playoffs that carried you into a World Series that they ultimately lost. But that was the fruits of a long rebuild. Since then, you've seen all those guys eventually fade away and drop from this rotation. And all the Mets had when it comes to developing guys to fill those spots, it's just been these 2. Otherwise, they've been adding through free agency. And for a while, that was an indictment on what this franchise has done as far as developing starting pitching. And now they put more of an emphasis on that. And hopefully there's going to be some better starters in the pipeline in years to come. But these 2 guys have really started to realize their potential. Peterson, he's done it all year long. Tylor Megill, his last 5 starts have been great, and he has a chance here to deliver a performance that we'll never forget and really go into next season off of the back of this performance as a starting pitcher that the Mets are comfortable with breaking an opening day rotation. Over his last 5 starts, Tylor Megill has a 1.78 ERA. He's given up 5 earned runs and 25 1/3 innings pitched. He had that start in Toronto, 6 shutout innings, 1 hit, 2 walks, 9 strikeouts. Absolutely dominant. Followed up with another 6-inning performance, 1 unearned run, 2 hits, 2 walks, 4 strikeouts against the Nationals. Last time out against the Phillies, 4 strong innings in that Sunday Night Baseball showdown with Zach Wheeler. The Mets were aggressive going to their bullpen. He had given up just 1 run, walked 2, struck out 6. I think we could see something of the same today. If the Mets can get a lead and they get Megill to the lineup the first 2 times, they might be aggressive with their bullpen. Even though you have a doubleheader to get through, you just got to think about getting 1 win. And do I think Tylor Megill can get you through 5 strong innings against the Braves and really deliver? I think it's possible. And you never know what can happen. If the Mets score the way they did on Sunday and Tylor Megill's pitching with the 5-run lead and he's cruising through 5, the Mets might just keep running him out there for another inning and really seeing if they can get some length there. But to me, it's just about the first 2 times through. Tylor Megill, can you go out there and limit this Braves offense, keep the Mets in the game, and then hopefully they can win it with their bullpen and just hopefully their bats can come through. But this is going to be an exciting matchup for Megill to go up against a guy in Schwellenbach who has owned the Mets lately. And as we'll talk about the lineup in the final segment today, it's going to be a great opportunity for the Mets to get some revenge on Schwellenbach, who's carved them up, and hit their way into the playoffs. So I think the Mets are doing the right thing here with their pitching, but it doesn't mean that it's going to be easy. Regardless of the outcome, whether they win or lose the first game, there's going to be ramifications for how they handle just getting through 18 innings and then having to start a wild card series the very next day. I want to talk about that in the next segment here. How would the Mets navigate a game 2 if they win a game 1? We'll go through that in just a minute. First, though, quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. So when you get a hunch in the middle of a game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Again, $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. FanDuel.com, America's #1 sportsbook. Stay up to date with all the latest in the world of sports when you check out Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube. If you're watching on YouTube today, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. The goal has been to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the season. We're almost 100 away, so I appreciate all of you who continue to subscribe. All right, let's talk about how you get through this doubleheader. If the Mets lose game 1, then it's going to be Severino game 2. And the pitching dilemma for the day, it's a lot easier because you can get length out of Severino. It's a must-win game. Hopefully he would show up in a big way, get you through 7 innings, and then you're just trying to close it out with a victory to clinch your playoff berth. The problem would then be all those different, discussions they'll have when it comes to the wild card round that I talked about in the last segment. Are they starting all their guys on short rest? Are they going to a bullpen game? We'll see what happens if and when we get there when it comes to that. But let's just imagine here that the Mets are going to win the first game today. They clinch game 1 and they're good. All right, well, how do you get through that second game knowing that you're going to save Severino for game 1 of a wild card series? I was looking at it, and I talked about it earlier this week, just the idea of maybe calling up somebody to be on your team, on your roster, so you'd have a minor league starting pitcher that could go in a game 2 and save the bullpen. And the Mets could go that route. Maybe Joey Lucchesi is good to go, and they can clear a spot on the 40-man roster by putting Christian Scott on the 60-day IL, and you add Joey Lucchesi to the 40, you put him on the roster, you option Alex Young. You can do that, but here's the thing. If you make that move, Alex Young, you can't use him for 15 days. That's how this works. I thought that you could still just make your playoff roster with anybody on your 40 after the season. It doesn't work like that. That counts as a designation, and you cannot add him back onto your active roster for 15 days. So you're going to burn one of these relievers that you might want to add to your roster for an NLDS potentially, right? These series, if you do get that far, if you make it, if you win the wild card round, the NLDS is going to happen, next weekend. So you really got to think about what the fallout would be of doing that. If you really don't see a scenario where someone like Alex Young or Huascar Brazaban is going to pitch for you in the first couple rounds, and you could actually get Lucchesi in the building, I guess it makes some sense, but ultimately I think the Mets are just going to keep the same roster that they've had here and roll into this doubleheader with it and figure it out. Beyond that, you could always make changes to your playoff roster depending on how you've exhausted your pitching. So we'll see. Let's just go through this, though. Let's say that you get 5 innings from Tyler Megill. You got Jose Butto rested and ready to go. If you have a lead, you can go to Jose Butto and maybe get 2 innings out of him. Let's say that gets you through 7. Phil Maton in the 8th, Edwin Diaz in the 9th. You win that game, great. Great. You cover the first 9 innings. Awesome. Now, what do you do for the next 9 innings in a game that the Braves would desperately need to win? As much as you want to stick it to them, and hopefully the lineup can do that against Chris Sale and really shock the world, you're not going to be putting your best foot forward in a lot of ways because you have to prepare for what's ahead. So get through 9 innings the best way you can. Alex Young and Huascar Brazaban, they're probably going to be put to the limit, and they're going to pitch a lot. And I guess that would be the argument to potentially go to a Joey Lucchesi. Maybe you want to petition to the commissioner's office, even though he's not part of your 40-man roster now. You probably, because he's been with the organization the whole season, you could probably get him added to a playoff roster. And so maybe he would be a viable option for you in the next round if you just needed some length. I don't know. Yes, it would save Young and Brazaban from having to cover 5 innings potentially. And if both those guys can do that for you, they're not really going to be viable options in the wild card round anyway. So again, you just sort of have to think about how you're going to manage that playoff roster. But hey, maybe Kodai Senga is this wild card they want to throw on that roster. Maybe Paul Blackburn is. You just don't know. Like I said, I ultimately think they're going to keep the pitching as it has been, and they're just going to try to get through it and then make those decisions the following day. So I would look at Alex Young and Brazaban as guys that will cover big innings and in the parts of the games that don't matter. So let's just say Megill gets rocked. Those guys are going to try to carry you through that first game so you can save your Diaz, Maton, Butto, Garrett, all those type of guys for a potential chance to clinch in game 2. So let's just say you get through 4 innings with those 2 guys. Then between Adam Ottavino and Ryan Stanek, you might want to get 3 innings, okay? And then 1 other inning from Danny Young, Reed Garrett, you can get through those 9 innings. You're just going to pitch everybody. Every single arm in that bullpen, every single arm outside of your starters that aren't going are going to be needed. And you're just going to survive the day the best you can and pick up the pieces on Tuesday when you have to try to put your best foot forward in a wild card round. Again, winning game one is so massive, though, because to be able to go with Severino, Manaea, Quintana in the wild card round, all on regular rest, or for Sevy on a couple extra days rest, with maybe David Peterson available out of the bullpen on short rest, that's the best case scenario for the New York Mets at this stage. Hopefully they get the job done. It's going to be on the offense to finally get to Spencer Schwellenbach. Who's going to start this first game? Who's going to start the second game, depending on the circumstances? I'll go through all of that in the next segment. First, though, another quick word from our sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater events near you. If you're in the Atlanta area today, you can still get to the game using Game Time, or maybe you want to catch the playoffs at any point. Again, Game Time is the place to go. Or if the season ends today and maybe you want to go to a concert or a live theater show, whatever it is, head over to Game Time, and they have the Game Time picks, which are going to make it easier for you to get tickets for your favorite live events, because they're going to filter out the fluff and only show you incredible deals on great seats. So you don't have to waste your time searching through thousands of tickets. You can get the best possible seats, especially with last-minute tickets, using Game Time. When you download the Game Time app, you can create an account and use the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. If you're an everyday listener to the show, make sure you become a Locked On Mets insider. This is our texting service where you get updates from me anytime news breaks in the Mets. You can ask me questions anytime. You can also take part in our Locked On Mets signed photo giveaways, and you get a line graphic sent to your phone each day so you know who's in the starting lineup without ever having to go on social media. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/LockedOnMets. All right, so can the Mets finally get to Spencer Schwellenbach? And what's the lineup going to be to try to do that? I'll tell you one key difference from what we saw when the Mets faced the Braves earlier this week and they faced Schwellenbach. Francisco Lindor was not in the lineup. He will be for this game, that is for sure. And he's got to set the tone again. The Mets have to come out with that same intensity we saw against the Brewers to get that victory. They have to be taking the extra base when they can. They have to be really locked into their at-bats, doing everything they can to scratch some runs across and try to win this first game. I think they probably roll with the same lineup we saw on Sunday. I imagine JD Martinez is going to be back in there at DH. You're trusting his experience. And just the fact that you look up and down that lineup, JD Martinez offensively has had the best career out of any of these guys. And so he just came off of a really good game, had a crucial double in that fourth inning, had good at-bats all the way through. That's the guy that you're going to put in this game. You're not going to go Jesse Winker because he bats left-handed. I'm sorry. Look at their careers. Which guy are you playing? Jesse Winker or JD Martinez? You're going with JD Martinez. Now, in the outfield, you could make a case to go to Jesse Winker just because I don't know if Starling Marte is going to be available for both games of the doubleheader. So if you wanted to, yeah, maybe you go that route. At the same time, it's do or die. I'm starting the best player. And again, you're going on track record. Like, who's had the better career, Starling Marte or Jesse Winker? Who's going to show up in a big moment more, Winker or Marte? To me, it's Marte, not only for his battle, that's a large part of it. Who knows? Maybe there's a point in the game, Tyler Megill's on the mound, fourth inning, there's a runner on second base, there's a well-struck single to center field, and they're sending him. They're trying to score. Having Starling Marte's arm out there, he could show up in a big way and gun down a runner. It's not like he's a significantly better outfielder than Jesse Winker, but he has one trait out there that is better. So to me, it's a clear-cut answer when it comes to the starting lineup. You roll with the same one that you got to win with on Sunday. Francisco Alvarez stepped up big time. You want his bat in the lineup. Obviously, the infield's going to stay the same. The only real debate is that outfield. Nimmo's going to start. I think Tyrone Taylor has clearly earned that starting center fielder job. And in right, I'd go with Marte. I really would. And you could bring Bader off the bench if you get a lead and go to your plus outfield defense starting lineup, or, go not the starting lineup, but you go to that plus outfield of Bader and center Taylor and Wright to hold a lead, you know that is a recipe for the Mets. And if they wanted to, if they were going to decide to bench Marte game 1 to have him ready for game 2, I'd probably lean Bader and Taylor starting and just put the best defense possible behind Megill rather than putting Winker out there because he just hasn't been that good lately. I can't see the Mets using him unless it's a pinch hitting opportunity, honestly. Now, if you win game 1, you're going to face Chris Sale, but you just don't care at that point. So if it is facing off against Chris Sale, I imagine Starling Marte is not going to play that game. I imagine Francisco Lindor is not going to play that game. Why are you going to run Lindor to the ground if you've locked up the playoff berth? It's going to be Acuna at short. It's going to be probably Bader in the outfield instead of Marte. You might still have Taylor and Nimmo. I don't know. Or maybe you would get Winker a game because it doesn't matter at that point. You want to give him a little bit of run. And maybe it's, Bader in center, Nimmo in left, and you have Winker and Wright, or maybe you just don't care about trying to beat the Braves and you give Nimmo a day, or not a day, but a game. Like, they could really just rest a lot of these guys if they wanted to. I imagine Jose Iglesias would not play that second game because you have Eddie Alvarez for literally this doubleheader, and then he's not eligible for the postseason roster. You could use him, and Iglesias, he's not listed as hurt, but if you watch him lately, he's got some type of a foot injury. He's playing through it. I'm sure he's fine. But you can see him laboring with that. I think it's his left foot. You can see it. So getting those guys rest too, that's another big benefit of winning this first game. So hopefully the Mets can get the job done. I'd also say Torrens, I don't think they will start him unless they win that first game. Otherwise, I think Alvarez catches both games of this doubleheader. You're putting your best foot forward. You are trying your best to just get in. That's all that you care about. That's been the mission this season, get to the playoffs. And you got a shot to get the job done, which leads us to the title of today's show. The New York Mets deserve to make the playoffs. Kind of buried the lead here, talking about everything else, but I wanted to set the stage for what we're going to see when it comes to the pitching, the lineups, all of it. Now let's just talk about this from a macro perspective of what this season has been for the New York Mets and why it would feel so empty and unfair if this doubleheader ends up being the nail in the coffin of their season and the Braves somehow find a way to sweep it, even not caring really what happens in the second game. This Mets team has been through so much this season, and they've given us an incredible run. They're playing games that matter on the final day of September. They're right there from getting into October baseball. And you think about the season Francisco Lindor has had. Between the meeting that we've talked about ad nauseum, but it has been worth talking about because it's the single biggest turnaround I think I've ever seen in my lifetime of a team that just snapped their fingers and just completely reinvented themselves in June. And part of that was the roster changing, bringing up Jose Iglesias, Mark Vientos being your everyday third baseman, Torrens getting added into the fold. It was definitely some of that, but really it was your leader, Francisco Lindor, setting the tone and everybody else fell in line. And also, you can't say enough about the starting pitching the Mets have gotten on this run. To have gotten the seasons they have out of Sean Manaea, Luis Severino, Jose Quintana, and David Peterson. It's been remarkable. And even Tyler Megill, he goes into the start with an ERA under 4. It's kind of impressive to have gotten that level of performance from the starters, from Lindor's MVP season, from just the insane production they got from Iglesias and Vientos, who started the season in Syracuse. And then you get to the fact when it comes to deserving to be there, this is potentially the last season where Pete Alonso's a New York Met. And if you look at my lifetime as a Mets fan, born in 95, really came into my Mets consciousness during the Mike Piazza era. And then David Wright and that team was, my team that really cemented me as a Mets nut job for the rest of my life. Throughout all of that time, the best homegrown players that I saw, it was David Wright and Jose Reyes during those years, right? That combination on the left side of your infield, it was amazing to see that level of all-star talent. Well, Brandon Nimmo and Pete Alonso have not been that. But when it comes to homegrown players, they have been very good. And you look at the history of these franchises, these are guys that it would be tough to get beyond, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 names of guys who have been more significant to this franchise offensively than these two. I'd really have to do the time and think about it. If you go to homegrown guys, I mean, they're probably top 10, honestly. Now, that says something for the franchise, but it also says something about those two. And they deserve to go on a playoff run together. And I just don't want to see that end right now at the 11th hour. Those guys deserve it. Everybody in that clubhouse deserves it. They were the best team in baseball for 4 months. And if they don't make it, it comes down to a single game. Think about all those blown games, the beginning of August and throughout May. How many of those games could have gone the other direction? If you're the Diamondbacks right now and you're thinking about where you're at, losing that game to the Mets, the final game of that series, where Edwin Diaz got the save the day after he gave up that grand slam to Corbin Carroll. What was that, a 3-2 game? 3-1 game, something like that? It wasn't high scoring. That tiebreaker could be the difference from them making the playoffs. And who knows, they might have had a similar game that was close against the Braves. That's the amazing thing about baseball. You play 162 games, and at the end of it, it can come down to a tiebreaker. That's the beautiful thing about baseball, and if it doesn't go your way, that's the incredibly frustrating thing about baseball. But the Mets have an opportunity today to make every single thing worth it. And once we get beyond it, whether it's today's horrible or they get into the wild card round and their pitching was exhausted and they lose and baseball ends this week regardless. Either way, I do believe we will look back on this season very fondly. Just like I look back at the 2019 season very fondly. But not getting to the playoffs, it just it dampens what was a remarkable season, and this team does not deserve that. I also should mention, first year under new leadership, could not feel any better about where this franchise is going. And those guys deserve it too. David Stearns, that front office that he put together, and then hiring Carlos Mendoza to be the leader of this team, it makes me so confident that there's so much better baseball still ahead for this franchise. But they have done something this year that no one expected out of them, and it is more deserving of a playoff berth, in my opinion, than a Braves team that has so much talent that went through an awful year that at this point, just would have kind of been fortunate and backed in some ways. I mean, they obviously deserve it if they get in. They've overcome a ton themselves. So I don't want to misconstrue it, but like this is here's the point of it. Because if there's a Braves fan listening, fire away the comments that you hate me. I'm cool with it on YouTube. But the Braves, no one's gonna and for a Braves fan, unless this team turns in an incredible playoff run, no one's gonna look back at the 2024 season fondly. It's just gonna be like, oh man, that year they lost so many guys, and the offense just went through such prolonged slumps. It was such a brutal season. It's not going to be remembered in a positive light unless they make the playoffs and win a couple rounds. The Mets, this is one of the best seasons of the last 10 years. I've been covering this team since 2019. This is my 6th season doing this show. 2021 right now was the best year. Although if the Mets make the playoffs, I'm putting this above that. I really am. And then there's the 2019 season. And that's 6 years in a decade. And the 4 years prior to that weren't very good. So, wait, hold on. I'm trying to do the math. I guess the 2015 year was pretty good. The 3 years prior to that, well, 16 was good too. 17 and 18 were a little bit rocky. The last 8 years, sorry, okay? Point is, this is a Mets season that should end in October. And I really hope that happens. We just got to wait and see where the chips fall at the end of the day. And I will be giving you content throughout the day. If the Mets win game one and they'll clinch, I think I'm going to do a live show. So if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you subscribe, put the notification bell on so you know if and when I go live. If you are listening on the podcast feed, go find the YouTube channel. You can tune in live. And if I do that show in between games, I'll post it to the podcast feed as soon as I can as well. Now, if it takes both games and the Mets win the second one, I'm going to do a live stream. If the season ends, I still think I'll do a live stream. So again, I will be giving you content today. I'll be giving you content tomorrow, either way as well. Let's see where this road takes us. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, review wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on X at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. If you want to be a Locked On Mets insider, find a link in the episode description. Go to subtext.com/Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listener, your first watch every day. Now for your second watch, head over to YouTube and check out the first ever 24/7 streaming channel that covers everything in the world of sports, talking about Locked On Sports Today with our local hosts from each team, league-wide hosts from each league. Find Locked On Sports Today, streaming 24/7 on YouTube.